But in retrospect, this is embarrassing for a lot of reasons. Sandberg was using identity politics to dangle a shiny object in front of gullible journalists and corporatists who'd rather talk about, quote, banning bossy than Facebook's fundamentally anti-human, addictive, destructive business model. She was actively pushing and profiting off of the destruction of social capital and young minds at the time. Now, of course, she also was articulating a vision of equality that resonated with the educated workaholics in media, but insulted the rest of the country. Check out this data from Gallup as well. Women with young children prefer to be homemakers. That sounds icky to a lot of women conditioned by our highly industrialized, globalized world to see themselves as widgets. Major corporations will freeze women's eggs for them. They'll cover the costs of that. That is not respect. It's dehumanizing. It's treating you as a cog in their machine. Working mothers are statistically inefficient. Yes, all the media coverage and girl boss nonsense is partially a cope for women who want to justify missing some reasonable personal milestones because of professional priorities. Sure. But it's also rooted in modern capitalism's effort to mold us into the most efficient cogs possible. It's bad news in the sense that we live in a much more cynical world, but good news in the sense that our cynicism is entirely warranted. I would be concerned if we weren't appropriately cynical right now. The Trump era really tore the curtain back on our political and cultural establishments, and then COVID came along, then the unrest of 2020, and nobody is buying what they're selling anymore. So living in a highly industrialized, highly globalized world has pushed people to move away from their families, to become transients in new communities they don't buy property in and then bounce around where work takes them, to adopt standards of success that involve competing on a global scale as an individual. I think we know better now than to let Sheryl Sandberg set the standards for our lives. I think Sheryl Sandberg Lean In became more of a demand to women and less of a mantra, less of a suggestion. It felt like a demand. And I think the way, because that resonates with so many women in media, the way we have this conversation nationally is so stacked for very highly educated women who are, have made an intentional decision to push family off or whatever, and just have different priorities than the majority of women. And so I just think the messaging for women, I mean, those two numbers are huge, that we have the first increase in the birth rate, small as it is, and a record number of women dropping out of the workforce in a way that actually coincides with their preferences. So like if you look at just that record number dropping out in a vacuum, it might sound like bad news. But when you see that most women prefer not to work full-time if they have a child under 18, maybe it's good news.